Hello, welcome back to Lost and Found No More Secrets. My name is Heidi, and I'm the host of the show. I'm joined today by Jennifer, who is also a volunteer genetic genealogist with DNAngels, and my co host today. Hi, Jen.
Hi, thanks for having me on today. Happy to be here and hear a little bit more about Trina's story.
I have to tell you, I just got done reading Trina's story, and I am so excited to hear the full reveal because it had me on the seat of my pants when I was reading her room. So, without further ado, let's bring up our special guest, Trina, who's coming all the way from Germany to join our show today.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. Hi, Trina.
Hi, Jennifer. Hi, Heidi. So nice to be here with you this evening.
Hi, Trina. What time is it there in Germany for you? How far?
It is 2 minutes to 8 p.m.
Oh, okay. Okay. Quite from Texas. That's a long ways.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to go ahead and just dive into your story. Tell me a little bit about your family structure and what it was like growing up for you.
Okay. I grew up I was born in New Jersey, but grew up in Pennsylvania. Mother, father, younger sister, and always lived in the southeastern Pennsylvania area, where I went to high school right outside of Philadelphia.
Okay, so what landed you in Germany?
I actually came to Germany as an exchange student when I was 14. Had the wonderful experience of being with a really fantastic family, and they just opened up the love of the country to me so that I went back to the States, had complete reverse culture shock, ended up graduating high school at the end of 11th grade after bombing academically once I got back. But made a deal with my father and said, if I can graduate with full credits at the end of the 11th grade with a straight A average, will you finance my trip back to Europe? He looked at my report card with F's and D's and said, you do it, girl, thinking any improvement would be welcome. I not only graduated at the end of the 11th grade, I also gave our baccalaureate speech for the entire class.
That is amazing. You were on a mission.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was no stopping you.
That's true.
So you are what is known as an NPE, which means not parent expected, non-paternal event. Growing up, did you have any suspicion whatsoever?
I actually did, although it was always kind of pushed aside. I think the first real hint that I got that was concrete, when I was about 12, my mother had a drawer in her chest of drawers where she had her evening bags, her gloves, and all kinds of really nice things. And every once in a while, I would go in there and try on her evening gloves and look through her things. And in one of her evening purses in the back, I found what were actually adoption papers that my father was adopting me. And a little bit in the future, I mentioned this to my mother, and she said, well, although we don't talk about it, you were born a year before we got married. So because you were born out of wedlock, he had to adopt you. I didn't know any better, so I believed it. But that was the first real inkling. As years progressed, I would hear things from my mother's older sisters, just little things that didn't add up. And one thing that I did know that was part of my mother's lore was that she was basically seeing two people at the same time when she graduated from high school. One was my father, and the other one was sort of, it was always this toss-up situation. Very similar backgrounds. Both of them were in the military service. Both of them stationed overseas back and forth. The second one was a friend of my mother's oldest brother, and he was stationed in the area in South Jersey, and estranged from his family, so that my grandmother kind of became his surrogate mother.
Mhm.
And later on, I met him because when he came back to the States, he was basically based at my grandmother's house, and he was my uncle, and his wife
Mhm.
was my aunt. And as a matter of fact, this is where the original interest in Germany came up. His wife was German, and they had two small children. She spoke German to the children at home. When he went back to a next station, he asked my mother and her older sister to be her sponsors. And I would be in the home hearing her speak German and started picking it up. She was also the one who gave me my first German books to help me to learn German before I began taking German as a foreign language in high school. So that
Very
was
interesting.
basically it. And I was basically at some point when the aunties started saying things, I kind of thought, well, you don't know, maybe, things happen.
Do you look anything like the father that's on your birth certificate?
Everyone always tells me I look like his sisters. So
Okay.
from that, and I've never heard from that side. There has never been any rumor, any strange remark, nothing at all. Although I have to say, they say I look especially like a specific sister of my father's, but I look a lot like my mother and a lot like her family. So it's kind of, yeah.
Right. So what prompted you to take a DNA test?
I had been hearing things over the years. I had given both of my parents DNA tests for their 80th birthdays. I'm also the mother of two children who are adopted. So at some point, I said to them, if you all would like DNA tests, they've always known they were adopted. If you'd like to take one, I'll buy them for you. It happened that my daughter somehow messed up her password for her account. And I said, you know what? Before we get into all the whatever, I'll just order you another kit, which I did. And then she ended up calling to the States, getting the password issue straightened out. So I had another kit. I said, oh, I might as well do it too. And I was kind of in a space where I figured I would probably have a boring biography. My father is probably my father. And if it's not my father, it's probably that other guy who I know. He returned to Germany years later. I know his children. And if they are my half siblings, so what?
Right.
I took the test, and neither man was my father.
So by the time you took the test,
So you were surprised.
by the time you took the test, your birth certificate father had already taken his test and gotten his results back and was not a
Yes.
match to you.
Was
So that's
not
when
a match.
that's when the
Yes,
red flags
yes,
come up. Now,
yes.
was your mother in a position to be able to go and ask her questions?
Unfortunately, not. My mother by that time was having severe health issues, but also was suffering from onset dementia. And I took, I was in no hurry because I thought I would know the answer one way or the other. And I was comfortable with either result that I thought I was going to get. So that by the time I actually took the test and had the information, I just did not want to bother my birth certificate father, nor my suspected father and his wife, nor my mother, and made the conscious decision not to confront either of them. And as it turned out, both men actually ended up passing away within a week of one another a few months later.
Mm.
Wow.
Do
Yeah.
you think
So-
that your father that raised you, did he know, do you think?
I have no idea. I have to say, I
Okay.
always say my father was my biggest cheerleader. I'm more in temperament like my mother, so I always felt that his a little bit of extra closeness to my sister was more that they're alike personality wise, while my mother and I are alike a lot, or were alike a lot past
Mhm.
personality wise. She's also passed away in the meantime. But again, he was the one who okayed the trip back to Europe. He was the one who did all of these things, and like I said, was always my biggest cheerleader. So if he knew, he was okay with it, and if he didn't know, he was none the wiser and had no suspicions.
So you get back your DNA results, and you're probably really confused on what do I do with these. Your mom showed up on your matches,
Yes.
so you were able
Yes.
to tell which was your paternal side. And I remember you had some really close matches, but you
Yes.
didn't know who they were.
I had no idea who they were. And the problem was also they had really common surnames. And I did not know where to start. And I was trying to reach out to them via the ancestry site, via email, and was getting no response whatsoever. And it was a dead end, or looked like a dead end at least.
Right. So you decided to become a client with DNAngels, and Linda Grinnell was assigned to be
Yeah.
your angel.
Yes.
Tell me about how it was like working with Linda.
It was great working with her, especially because we were just so flummoxed in every case. She was looking at some of the more distant matches as well, trying to piece together whatever information I could give her based on oral history, but also we had the problem that very few people had extensive trees. And unfortunately, whether it was because they didn't realize they were NPEs or knew and simply chose not to add the other information, there were always paternal roadblocks that came. Based on Linda's research, I was able to get a street address for the woman who turned out to be my half sister, and the street address for the person who was also my half brother, paternal half sister and paternal half brother. I reached out to the woman first, and it took a bit for her to respond. She thought, what kind of scam is this? But her daughter, she spoke with her daughter, and her daughter was actually the motor behind her doing her DNA test. So her daughter said, well, we need to be careful, but let's see what's going on. And she agreed to speak to me on the phone, and we spoke on the phone. And it quickly became clear to me, because I found a picture of her birth certificate father in an old yearbook on Ancestry. It became clear to me her birth certificate father is unlikely to be my father, and she has no idea that he's not her biological father.
So she is also an NPE, and now you're stuck with what do I do with this information? I mean,
And
delicate.
I did not feel comfortable because it was obviously she did not suspect. I did not feel comfortable confronting her with this possibility. And I just basically left it like that, thinking there has to be another way, because I think even Linda asked me. We knew who her mother was. We had information on her mother, current address. If I felt okay with maybe reaching out directly to the mother. And to be honest, I did not. I did not want to show up as a stranger at the door, of someone who's in her mid 80s and say, could it be, And I also realized that if I upset her mother, I could also destroy whatever tentative bond I was developing with my sister.
What about the half brother? Were you able to contact him?
You know,
I just real
unfortunately,
quick before you answer that. That is
yep,
such great forethought. It was just really detailed and intense forethought there for what
yep,
could
yep,
happen, right? If you
yep.
push it through, you know, to go
Mm,
right to her mother, because it's such a sensitive issue. So that was
definitely.
good when you want to know so bad and you put other people's emotions kind of right up there with yours. Have to find the best way. Well done.
I really, because I was trying to play the long game. If there's a connection, I wanted to give it the best
Mhm.
possible foundation. And
Wow.
that can't be me elbowing into the life of
Very
an
smart.
older woman like that. In
Mhm.
any case, again, because of the
Right.
very, very common names, first and last names, I actually got an address from Linda, I believe, but it was the wrong person. Geographically, it would have matched and it would have made sense, but it wasn't him in the end. And I also, as with my sister, I sent snail mail and everything, got no response to the letters I sent. And it came out later that it wasn't the person that I had written
Mhm.
to. I have contact with him now, but at the time I was off on a little bit of a wild goose chase, just simply because of a very, very
Hmm.
common name.
When you got in contact with your half sister, did she know who the half brother was, or was that person a stranger to her?
It was a stranger to her at the moment. Funnily enough, the person that Linda identified lived down the street from her niece or her sister-in-law. So I think it was her niece. So she did ask her niece about him, and the info came back, oh, this gentleman has passed away. So we're
Mhm.
thinking, oh, this is definitely a dead end. Fortunately for our search, at least, it was the wrong person, and our brother is very much healthy and alive.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, you, what happens with your half sister is I think eventually the bells kind of start ringing in her head, and she goes to her mother, who is thankfully still alive, like you said, in her 80s. Tell me that story, because I found that really crucial to your case.
It was slightly different. She was visiting her mother. She had no idea. She she originally thought when I contacted her that her birth certificate father had outside children. So, although she was open and gave me information, she wasn't very emotionally committed to the whole idea. So, at this point, she went to her mother. Her daughter was doing whatever research she could do. And out of the blue, her mother said, there's something I need to tell you. And apparently, her mother said, in her mind, she planned to write a letter, put it in a safe, and this letter was to be given to my sister upon her passing sometime in the future. However, the spirit moved her and she said, this is a conversation I have to have with my daughter directly.
Good for
So
her.
out of the blue, this bombshell basically dropped into my sister's lap. And she found out that the man that she had always believed to be her father was not her biological father. And fun fact, she mentioned in the course of this conversation, she mentioned to her mother, I'm in touch with this woman in Germany. She got in touch with me. We've matched up on Ancestry, and her mother knew about me.
Wow.
So her mother was able to
Wow.
corroborate that the man who was my sister's father, and my sister is younger than I am, that he was also my biological father. Because her
Wow.
mother and my mother were the same age. They attended the same high school. And although they weren't in each other's circle, they were in the same grade. So they kind of knew, the name kind of rang a bell. And although I wasn't born while my mother was in high school, her mother knew approximately who I was, or who my
Wow.
mother was, better said. And she knew that this person's daughter had been fathered by this same man.
I'm so glad that she was brave to open up. I'm sure that was very heavy, weighing very heavy on her shoulders. Hopefully,
Exactly.
hopefully she felt so
Yeah.
much better letting the truth out, because not only did it give her daughter the truth, but your truth as well.
As well.
Fascinating.
And my sister got in touch with me. I was going through some situations with a family member here, and so I was in a lot of stress when I got an email from my sister, and we hadn't been in touch recently. I had no new news, and we had said we would, sporadically touch bases, but I said, you know what, I'll wait until the Christmas holidays and I'll send holiday greetings, and we can, but this was around Thanksgiving. And she wrote me and said, does this name mean anything to you? And it did, because the other part
It did?
I actually knew who it was.
Wow. Another
Because
mouth drop.
What?
Wow.
I knew the name, and I wrote back to her and I said, this is who that is. And she just basically, what can you tell me? And I knew this person, and I knew him because he is a much younger cousin of my mother's stepfather. There are like 25 years between my mother's stepfather and him. But as it was, on a Friday night, people got paid. They sat together. My grandmother would cook. The adults would play cards. People from the neighborhood would come in. And when we were visiting, he would be there.
So you
And I
had
can
met
remember,
him.
asking my mother, a lot of times we just knew that these were family members or these were neighbors. We didn't know the exact connection. And I can remember as a child, and I don't know what motivated me, but I did ask her, how is he related to us? And she said, that's your grandfather's cousin, his first cousin. And in addition, I can remember being home for the summer in the early 2000s, and my mother asking me, do you remember his cousin? And I said, yeah, well, unfortunately, he's passed away. So I can actually even remember the very last time I saw him. I was about 12 or 13 years old, and it was summertime. We were visiting my aunts. They lived 2 doors from one another, and we were sitting out on the front step enjoying the wonderful weather, and he came walking down and stopped to talk to us. And I can remember it plain as day.
Wow.
And you ask yourself, why did I remember those incidents? Why did I ask who he was exactly? Why did I remember actually seeing him? And remember my mother mentioning to me, oh, he passed away.
I'm curious if he knew the truth.
I think he did. Looking back now, there were certain things that were said. I was trying to take context clues when my aunties would say something. He actually worked on the street where my aunties lived, farther like in toward the center of town, but he actually lived in that area. Like I said, he was my grandfather's first cousin. So there is no way that he didn't know, and there is no way that, oh, funny fact, when my sister got in touch with me, all of my mother's siblings have passed away. All of that older generation have passed away. But I have 2 cousins who are older than me, one 5 years older, one 8 years older, who lived in that area. Again, I was visiting one of their mothers and visiting them the day I last saw him. And I wrote both of them when my sister came to me, and I said, do you remember his cousin? Both of them clammed up immediately. One said, oh, I don't know him. He has to know him. And my other cousin just simply did not respond to that part of my message. So I take for granted that it was a secret kept in plain sight, that people knew, and I was the only one who didn't know.
Wow. No one expected for DNA to become so popular and secrets to no longer be kept.
Exactly.
That's right.
I'd like to piece together the other half brother DNA match that you have. Now, is he this? What was the man that is your biological father? Is he his actual? I mean, like raising social son?
Yeah,
Or was he another NPE?
We have found out in the meantime that my biological father had a total of 5 children. I'm the oldest. Then he married when I was about 1.5 years old. He got married. And from that marriage, and I think they were married until the woman passed away. He has 2 children from that marriage. And that is the brother. But in the meantime, later on, he had 2 other children outside of the marriage, one being my sister, and another being a slightly younger brother who was amongst my first cousin, whatever matches. 2 of his children had tested. And that's how we managed to piece that together, because 2 of his children tested. He never tested himself, but he knew, because he grew up in the same town where our biological father lived. He knew that that was his father. His mother told him, and our father didn't like raise him like a father, the youngest son, but he knew that he knew, and they talked or whatever. But as in my case, he had a wonderful father in his family when his mother later got married, and he didn't feel the need at that point to establish any kind of paternal relationship.
So he had a different last name. I'm thinking about this from a genetic genealogist standpoint, trying to put your case together. He didn't have the same last name as your biological father, and that's why Linda couldn't put the pieces.
Exactly. He had a different last name, and like I said, he knew immediately because he knew who his father was, but he had simply made the decision. I have a father here. Once his mother, his stepfather came into his life, and he knew, he said, he often, not often, but if they passed one another, they spoke. And sometime there was that kind of, older man advice in life, but it wasn't a paternal relationship.
I know you're in Germany, so I imagine you haven't had a chance to meet any of your siblings?
Unfortunately not. I unfortunately haven't spoken directly to my younger sister, the youngest sister, who is the daughter from the marriage. I have been in contact, however, with the sister who's next to me, with the oldest son and the youngest son. We've all been in contact. And the youngest sister, however, they knew about the youngest brother just after our biological father passed. That information came out, and he even visited the youngest sister, and she was quite forthcoming, sharing information, pictures, etc. with him when he visited. And when I was in touch with my brother, the older brother, he also shared pictures and shared stories and whatever. And now we're looking forward to coordinating a video call and just sort of putting a lot more of the pieces together. Now we're in contact kind of on individual level. The older sister and I, we are pretty much regularly in contact. The older brother and I, we are, in periodic contact. The youngest brother I've talked to on the phone, as well as his oldest son. The youngest sister I don't have the direct contact with, but I always greet her via her brother.
I can just imagine all of y'all being on a call or a video like this. I would love to be a fly on the wall for that video.
That was right. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah,
that would be so cool. And
so your life has changed.
It really has. I mean, sometimes I really, I always as a matter of fact, even before I did my initial DNA test, I always followed these types of stories, be it documentaries on television, be it, YouTube videos or something. I always followed the issue. So it was always a question for me. And in the beginning, it was always, well, will I ever get the definitive answer? Because I thought it was one of two people. And then I kind of thought, will I ever really know? So I sometimes have to pinch myself when not only do you know exactly who it was. It's somebody who you have a positive memory from, simply because you just knew from the interaction. And because I was related to my step grandfather, I knew that part of the family as well. That was one thing that my brother and I could talk about. I could say, do you remember his sister? Yeah, we went to visit her. And, there was all of this back and forth of us not running into one another, but just simply knowing that branch of the family. Although from my perspective, from a slightly different vantage point, but having a relationship with those people.
Fascinating. Such a fascinating story. Trina, both of your parents,
it really is.
Your biological father, your birth certificate father, and your mother, have they all three passed away?
Yes, they have. Yes, they have.
My
biological passed away in 2004. My birth certificate father and the man I thought would have been my father, they both passed away in 2019, and my mother passed away in 2023.
I'm so sorry. That in conclusion, I want to ask you a question. You might have to think about this for a second before responding. But I would like to ask you, if you had an opportunity to talk to your mother and ask her one question regarding your story, what would that question be to her?
I think, when I was conceived, both of my parents were single. They were, carefree and young at whatever. So I have no problem with that part of the story. I also understand the historical context of the late 1950s when it comes to having children out of wedlock. So I don't have any problem with the way she tried to give me the best life possible. I would, however, have asked her, in the meantime, when I found out I'm going to be 68 this year. So I would have asked her, wouldn't there have been an opportunity when I was maybe in my 40s, maybe, when you could have simply said to me, oh, like my sister's mother did, sit me down and say, there's something I need to tell you. I think that's the only... Right. If there's a hurtful part to this, it really is the fact that when I became an adult, she was not forthcoming. Maybe I think out of respect for my birth certificate father, who was an excellent father. However, I do think also in my role as the mother of adopted children, I do think the truth is essential. And that would definitely be the question I would ask.
Especially because as mothers, we're all mothers here, you expect to be able to, for your mother to be the one to never lie to you. Your mother is your safe person. Your mother is your protector.
Yes.
So I can definitely see both sides. Times were different then.
Right.
And out of respect for your birth certificate father, especially if he was a wonderful dad. But
yes. And again, it was just the idea that, they had even taken DNA tests and whatever. Maybe she couldn't grasp the genetic consequences. And like I said, I wasn't quick to take a DNA test of my own, but it was basically just a matter of time.
Right. I'm so glad that we were able to help you find your truth. Yeah. It's so important.
It was really just great to have somebody in that what would have otherwise been a vacuum. To have somebody as a sounding board, as a sparring partner, and even when I couldn't find things, we were finding the surnames. And the only people I could think of, going back over my own history, I remember saying, the surname of my step-grandfather is coming up. I don't suspect anything nefarious from him, but he had 3 sons from his first marriage. And I even said, and he had a first cousin who we knew. And it turned around after sort of not having any real connections. It turned out to be exactly that his cousin was the person. And as a matter of fact, another serendipitous point, my biological father and my birth certificate father share the same birthday.
Really?
Yes.
Really? Wow. Fascinating. Well,
So
Trina,
all
that's
kinds of little serendipities, yeah.
That's so amazing. Well, we're running out of time. I want to tell you that I really appreciate you joining us all the way from Germany. Thank you for trusting DNAngels and Linda with your journey. I know it's very raw and personal, and I'm just really glad that we were able to help you find answers. And I hope that you get a chance to at least do a Zoom call with your siblings.
Oh, definitely. We're all happy about the contact, and we are all committed to keeping that contact alive.
Brilliant.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Trina.
You're very lucky.
Thank all of you.
Yeah.
Thank all of you, because it was really an enriching experience for me, and it really has just finished up a chapter in the best possible way for me.
Oh, that's so well put. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you, Trina.
She did such a great job of telling her story. She's a great storyteller.
She does.
That was a lot to unpack.
So, as you, I think, picked up from the beginning, right. And I was not familiar with her story. So the twists and turns of that one, all those little connections throughout life and everything, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Right.
You know,
and I think that it's going to be
quite a story to tell.
It's going to be helpful for our clients when they watch this and reaching out to family, like what works for some people and doesn't work for others. But just the fact that she was holding the weight that her sister was also an NPE, and how she handled that with such grace, like you said, it's beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah. She didn't want to blow anybody else's world up. So she's like, we'll find another way to do this. Yeah. Yeah. It takes a lot of strength to do that, because I know what it's like to just be so close, you know, and you got to back up and come in from another angle. So she's amazing. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Okay, guys. Well, if you haven't already hit subscribe, guess what, Jen? I think we're over 11,000 viewers out of subscribers.
Ooh.
So, huge milestone.
I like that. That's a great number.
I know.
Great number.
If you haven't already hit subscribe, please do so. If you can comment and give your support for Trina, let us know what you think about her story. We'd really appreciate it. And we will see you next Thursday. Goodbye, everybody. Take care. Bye, Jen.